Thank you, Doug. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And I want to particularly thank all of you for giving me the opportunity to be with you this afternoon. And I also have some guests with me. I have actually our top-ranking CAO, a female, first time in the history of LA County, who is in charge of our budget administration, Sachi Hamai, who formerly grew up here in Denver, Colorado. Please stand, Sachi, and be recognized by our group. We also have our other executive team here, Jim Jones and also Fred Leap. We have a new health agency that was just transformative for LA County that was developed about 2 years ago. So it's the first time that we have someone who is serving there right now to help lead our Department of Public Health, Mental Health, and also Public Health, Mental Health, what am I missing? Department of Health Services, the biggie. But we're talking about part of Los Angeles County that's one of the largest counties in the entire country. So I want to first say, some of you may or may not know a little bit about me, and I wanted to take the opportunity to kind of shed some light on that because of your topic in terms of, you know, equity and values and governance and what that means. And I grew up in a time in Los Angeles County in the San Gabriel Valley with parents who immigrated here many years ago. They came from, respectively, Mexico and Nicaragua. They made their home in a suburb, kind of a suburb area, and raised their children. And they really taught us that work ethic meant a lot, being independent, but also showing self-respect for each other and for other people. So those are like the three main values that I continue to carry with me no matter what position I have. And growing up in that community taught me a lot. There were 7 of us, 7 children. So I was the third, and quite a rebel if you're a middle child, because you want attention. But in the time that I grew up, you know, it was hard. There weren't a lot of youngsters, young people from my particular school district, high school, that went on to college. And I was one of those students that would always ask questions. And it wasn't just to spark up a conversation with the faculty. It was to really ask questions about, why are we seeing so many young people coming back from the Vietnam War that were harmed or did not even make it home? They came home in body bags. And why was there so much distrust with our educational system? And why were there so few people of color, people in my own community, that had access to better jobs? Why were we always tracked to just vocational programs? In fact, one of my counselors there, quite honestly, told my mother at one appointment that I had asked about inquiring about going to college. And he told my mother, well, Mrs. Solis, I'm sorry to tell you, but your daughter's not college material. Maybe she ought to become an office clerk or a secretary. And of course, my mother was heartbroken, so was I. But if anyone knows me, when someone tells me something and I set my mind the other way, I work twice as hard. So I ended up going to Cal Poly Pomona, and that was that was a life-changing moment for me, in part because they had good programs, because they had programs for first-generation students. Because my parents were hardworking, certainly they wanted to have me do whatever I wanted to do and would support me, but they didn't have the means. So these special programs that they have at Cal Poly Pomona and at our state universities gave me that opportunity. All I had to do was really work hard, show up, get good grades, get financial aid that I needed to be successful, and then go on. And I had some good faculty members, good teachers that became my mentors. I went to a campus that was more in the technical area, but my major was in political science. So guess what? I got the benefit of the doubt. I had more access to my professors, and I could gain more insight from them. And they actually served as tutors and actually mentoring me and telling me how to navigate the system. And that helped me out a lot. Long story short, I ended up leaving there and really feeling charged up about how access and equity can really change somebody's life. After being told that I wasn't college material, now I knew that I could begin to see myself doing different things in different ways and making a change, and not just settling for what people would tell you or tell me at the time, that, oh, no, you can't do that, or no, that's not the right career path, or that's not the right road. I started to think and doubt that and say, you know what, maybe I need to start deciding what I want to do and where I feel best suited. And my interest has always been in serving community. So during that process, yes, I went on and got a master's degree at USC in public administration because I felt I wanted to make change in government. I didn't ever plan on running for elected office. That was never in my genes, I thought. And my parents thought I was crazy if I even mentioned anything like that, you know, because getting an education and higher education took a lot of sacrifice. And having gone through that, I learned a lot. At the same time that I received my master's, I served in the White House Office for Hispanic Affairs for Jimmy Carter. And I worked for then Special Assistant Congressman Esteban Torres. He wasn't a congressman at the time, he was a special assistant, but that's who I worked for. And I became really interested in what was happening there in Washington. And talk about education, limited access for minorities, people of color, poverty around the country, healthcare access was limited. All those things kind of came before me while I was serving there, and I was just an intern. I gradually stayed on as staff, but at that same time, I saw a very different political juncture in life. Jimmy Carter lost that election, and we had a new president, Ronald Reagan. And much of what Jimmy Carter had talked about and we worked on was now going in the opposite direction. Many of those ideals were now being rejected and turned away and going in a different direction. So I felt, okay, it's time to go home. So I came back to California and started working in education. And my priority was to help underserved students, much like myself, where I came out of, those communities, to try to empower young people to do better and to see themselves, to realize the potential of doing better in life. If they were given the tools and we could help their parents navigate and we could tell them that there were opportunities, there was financial aid, and there could also be a wonderful career path for them leading to any direction. So I did that for 10 years, and at the same time I ran for a school board. Some friends asked me, Hilda, why don't you get involved and give something back in that way? And I was petrified. I thought, oh my God, run for what? You know, it's like gambling. How do you know you're going to win? How do you know you're going to, you know, be successful? Well, I did. I ran, and I had a whole bunch of folks behind me. And once I did get on that board, we started to see changes on that board. Other people like-minded, like myself, started to think about how we could improve access to that campus. We started hiring up faculty and staff. We even hired a new president who had different values and reflected what the communities that we serve wanted. That was a big game changer, but it did come at a price. There was a lot of people that weren't really interested in seeing change because there was a very entrenched community that wanted things to stay the same. And many of us were saying, no, things have to change. So we pushed on. That happened. Long story short, someone talked to me again and said, Hilda, would you be interested in running for state office? And I said, well, I don't know. That's really a big step. And not having anyone in my family that had been in politics, I didn't know who I could reference this opportunity to or how I would get there. But there were people that came around, and part of it was the coalitions that I had built on campus at Rio Hondo and outside in the community. And I started to feel more empowered. I got elected to the assembly. I only stayed there one term, 2 years. Then I went on and ran for an open seat in the state senate and was the first Latina elected in California in the state senate. But it wasn't because of, I don't think it was because of my last name. I think it's because we really worked hard. And part of it was galvanizing all those different coalitions, environmental community, women's groups, educational groups, people that cared about young people getting jobs and access to education, people getting training and skills and things that are really important in life. And making sure that access was open to everyone, whether you were a re-entry student, a mother that had been on welfare, wanting to now come back to school and have access to childcare while she could get her training and certificates, or whether it was a first-time immigrant student who was trying to make a difference because their parents had worked in factories all their life, to have that opportunity. Those were the challenges for me that I saw. And that helped to propel me in the state legislature, and I continued that work. But one of my big passions was where I grew up, thinking about how people work so hard day to day, and yet not really knowing enough about their immediate environment and how that environment impacts the quality of life, particularly your health care. So I grew up in an area where we had the largest landfill. It's now closed. It's called the Puente Hills Landfill, the largest one this side of the Mississippi. And basically, it was about a mile away from where I grew up. We had a lot of air pollution at that time. We had a lot of contaminants in our water. We also found that there were very few parks and recreational spaces for people in those communities. You know, we call those communities park poor. And it's unfortunate because you're working, your families are there, you're striving to make a difference, and you try to understand how you can bring policies together to make change for families that are going to be most impacted. So we got to work on legislation, and I was able to pass one of the first environmental justice pieces of legislation in the country. After we passed it in California, we tried 3 times. The 3rd time we finally got it, and it was because we had a Democratic governor at the time. But it was still tough. We had a lot of business opposition, but nonetheless we got it passed. And after that, 25 states adopted the same exact legislation, environmental justice. I was very fortunate at that time, too, that it was going towards the late 90s that we passed that bill, but I also was very involved in making sure that working class people that I had grown up with, my own parents working in factories, by the way, were always just getting the minimum wage. And I always knew that that was really tough. Minimum wage was not enough to raise a family of 7. So mom and dad both had to work. It was really hard, and their children. Some of us had to take on part-time jobs and try to help out. So I remember that very clearly, how important it was. So when I got to the state Senate, one of the initiatives that I put forward with a coalition of labor groups, also with our religious organizations, women's groups, different groups and organizations out across the state, we organized a statewide initiative to pass the minimum wage because the legislature wouldn't do it, the governor wouldn't sign it. And we raised the minimum wage for the first time in 7 years. And in that time, you were getting $4.25 an hour. We were able to raise it to $5.75. But it was as though you were moving a battleship in an opposite direction. It took so much time and effort, but we galvanized people. And people from the business community told me that I was crazy to do that I was going to actually impact the very people that I wanted to speak up and protect. Poor people, because poor people would be laid off. People just couldn't pay the minimum wage. Well, guess what happened? The initiative passed by 63% of the vote in California. So it passed overwhelmingly. And I learned a great lesson from that, because you don't have to just listen to certain voices. You need to listen to all voices, and then make your decision as to how you can try to use that to coalesce and build upon and strengthen people and give them hope, and then help them aspire to also make changes at their local level. And that's what I learned when I was in the state Senate. In the Congress, I kept on working on environmental justice, but I also cared very much about the environment and making sure that as we started to look at sustainability and looking at how we were going to retrofit our homes and put solar panels and all these new jobs that could be created, that we didn't leave out the most vulnerable. Those people that live under the federal poverty line, also our veterans, people that were homeless, and working class families. So I worked with leaders in my caucus at the time in the Congress, and we passed legislation to enact a statute where we would create green jobs. And I take credit for that, not just myself, but the people I worked with, because that helped to create a foundation, I believe, for what our President Barack Obama put forward in terms of creating more jobs in the green industry. And Denver, Colorado, and states like this were really well known for doing that. And so we would coalesce with many people across the country, but in particular, small businesses and people that had been successful at this, and county government, because county government and state government can do a lot to help those sectors grow, to actually shine a light on where you can help alleviate poverty. You can increase employability, new skills for young people, and people may be looking for newer opportunities to create those sectors. So we learned a lot during that time in the Congress and then even in the administration. And I have to tell you, it was a daunting experience to be able to work as, to be appointed as a cabinet secretary. From the community that I came from listening to a high school counselor who said you weren't college material and said you should be an office clerk and a secretary, well, guess what? I will always have the title of Secretary of Labor for the United States government. But I want to touch on some things that I learned that helped to inform me and inform what I try to do now as a County Board of Supervisor. And part of it is, it's not looking at what zip code you are from, what ethnicity you are from, but looking at the totality of how you try to address a problem. And one that comes to mind, and maybe some of you might understand this a bit, while I was a cabinet secretary, there was a terrible explosion in West Virginia. We lost 29 miners in a major explosion. And as labor secretary, we were in charge of overseeing the mining company to find out what happened, and also to try to make the families whole, to understand what took place there. And at first, people told me in the administration, well, Hilda, you're not really the face that should be out there, so you shouldn't go. But I said, wait a minute, why was I hired? I have to go. And I think that was one of the best decisions I ever made, because the people in West Virginia, in that town, in that small town, were no different from the people where I grew up. They were working class people. They were working very hard to obtain the same values, good education, some semblance of a good life. So those things were not different. And for me, I learned a great lesson, that you don't have to think about red states or blue states. You come together and you deal with the issue and the challenges, and you listen to what those neighbors and the community are saying. And so we immediately got to work and tried to provide all the assistance that we could, not just to those 29 families that lost someone, but also to the greater area, to create and infuse more funding for jobs, and also creating different career paths, educational career paths, so that people, if they had to traditionally leave because there weren't any jobs, to create green jobs and other types of jobs right there in their own communities. And so we made tremendous investments in that particular area. I see the same thing now in my role as a County Board of Supervisor, making investments, not just myself, but for the first time, being able to see county government that historically, traditionally, has been very hard to move. And I'll tell you one thing that has happened just in the last course of less than 4 years. This is the first time in the history of LA County, one of the largest, 10 million people. Each board member, there are 5 of us, represent 2 million people. And we finally, and this wasn't planned, I don't think, we have 4 women. It's never happened, unheard of. We have a majority of women on the board. And we also have a progressive board. We have 1 Republican, 4 Democrats, 1 African American, and the others are all women. And you have an openly LGBTQ representative. You have myself, a Latina, and the other 2 women. It's incredible how we can come together and look at issues and not say, well, it's a red issue or it's a blue issue. It's really about tackling the issues that we care about. And one that we have tackled, and I think very fearlessly, has been the issue of homelessness, which if you look around the country and you look around our cities right now, you'll find, especially in LA County, we have the largest population of homeless. On any given night, 55,000 people are on the streets. And those are the ones that we can count. There are many more that we're not able to count. in part because there are different formulas that are used. School districts, for example, will calculate students being homeless if they live in somebody else's home that isn't their permanent address, that sleeps on somebody's sofa, that sleeps on a cot. Those are in addition to other children that are also being impacted by homelessness. I think our responsibility at the county is to help address that so that we can prevent people from having to live in the street, but also making sure we're collaborating with our school districts, with our stakeholders, with our religious organizations and nonprofits, and also those groups that are teaming up to help us address this issue. We have been able to pass, because of the board's support, to put a measure on the ballot that passed overwhelmingly 2 years ago. And we didn't ask for just 1 or 2 years for funding. We asked for 10 years of funding to be able to tax ourselves, and it would help us raise for 10 years $355 million annually for the county. And it wouldn't all just be divided by 5 people. It would go to our highest priority areas, and it would also be in collaboration with the city of Los Angeles, which is a large city. They also passed a measure, HHH, where they also were going to tax themselves to help work with us. The county then would provide wraparound services, mental health services, social services, job training, all those things that are necessary to stabilize someone so that they can come out of homelessness. So we put forward this plan, and as we move forward, we're finding and taking risks on how to address homelessness, because I don't think you can use a cookie-cutter approach on anything. We do know that we have to get more people involved and engaged, and already we know that we put 1,000 people that we've contacted into shelter, into a sense of having a roof over their head. We've also been able to provide funding to some of our cities. And keep in mind, I represent 2 million people, but 27 cities. Not all of those cities understand how urgent the issue of the homeless crisis is. So we made available a portion of money so that those cities could apply for technical planning grants, so that they too could then work alongside with the county to better understand how to address this issue. And we opened up not just our pocketbook, because it isn't just about throwing money out, because it's not really that much money, but it is an entree into saying, let's have that conversation, and let's see what your ideas are and how we can better fix these challenges that we face. In fact, we even gave money, and some board members weren't too keen on this, giving money to even the local law enforcement agencies. And you know why? Because firsthand, I saw this out in my own district, where the sheriffs actually had teams of people in the riverbeds, watersheds. People were living there, encampments. And in one particular area that I represent, there are now 100 encampments. Multiply that by individuals, you got a community there. You have maybe 20,000 people. Who knows? Could be more, could be less. Nonetheless, we have to do something about it. So giving money to law enforcement, but not just to go out there to penalize people and put them in jail or give them a citation, but it's to go out with mental health teams, wraparound services. So we're putting money into that as well. But we're even going farther than that, because we can't build enough housing as rapidly as we would like to. So we've come up with this concept. How many of you know what granny flats are? You know, it's the second house behind your home, right? Some of you know what that is. So we're starting now to constructively look at how we can build out on someone's property. If someone says, I agree to work with you, LA County, to build an additional unit for someone who's homeless, we'll help you. We'll give you a break. We'll even help fund that, and we'll even help provide wraparound services for that. How incredible is that? That's thinking out of the box. When is it going to happen? Hopefully it's going to happen sooner than later. But part of it is getting all of our cities and our local municipalities to understand that we can work together on this, not just one entity, but all of us working together. So it's a constant back and forth. The other thing I'd like to talk about is about creating jobs for people that are homeless as well, and people that are on the verge, those people that are at risk. And I continue to be concerned about them. When I came to the county, one of the first things I did was visited some of the assets. I call them assets, our facilities. Went to one of our military and veterans facility known as Patriotic Hall, Bob Hope Patriotic Hall. They had just refurbished the building. There was a kitchen there that had been rebuilt. A couple of, I don't know, $100,000 maybe spent on refurbishing it. But it wasn't used. There was not one pot in that kitchen. I looked at it and I said, why are we not utilizing this in a better way to put people to work, to maybe train homeless veterans, to be able to get training in the culinary arts. We can partner up with our local community college, get them certified, get them their uniforms and utensils, go through a 12-week training program, and then at the end of that, be able to get a good paying job right there in downtown Los Angeles or a neighboring area. So we're beginning to do that. We've already gone through a couple of classes that have graduated. But it didn't take that much to do that. It just took really persistence, and I think the support of our county as well as our neighboring stakeholders who are looking at this lens in the same vein, that how do we address homelessness? How do we help that homeless veteran and his or her family come together and provide them services in an area that traditionally may not have been open to them? And then going a step further there, and now creating programs where we're actually targeting people who were recently incarcerated, people coming out of state prison and out of jail, and looking at a cohort of people that might be interested in going into apprenticeship programs. And I'm talking about carpentry, I'm talking about pipe fitting, I'm talking about jobs that maybe some people aren't really thinking about, but right now in LA County, in the city of LA, we have a shortage. We are building so much that we don't even have the capacity to have all the workers that we need to help us build as fast as we want. So these folks are in demand, and we're taking a chance. We're taking a risk, but we're doing it in concert with wraparound services. We're doing it with our LA Trade Tech, our partner, a community college. We're doing it with a nonprofit group called ARC. It's the Recidivism Coalition that's come together, that's helping us identify these individuals and providing them with wraparound services. We've already graduated, I believe, 2 cohorts. Some are averaging anywhere from $70,000 to $100,000 annually. And I have seen, it's touching to see some of the graduates. I saw a gentleman, African American, who was in prison for maybe 20 years. It says, this is the first time that I feel like I have dignity, because I can go home, I can see my children that I haven't seen, that I have been separated from, and I can kindly sit there and just sit with them and watch TV and have a conversation with them. And it has changed the direction of these individuals' lives. And I think that what the county is doing is great. This is something that I know other states and local government are looking at, but I would say take the risk. Take the risk, do the right thing, and expand on your outreach. And if you want to see our statistics, I can tell you that the graduation rate is about 90%, and the placement is very high. So these programs are well worth it, but it takes time to bring those changes about. I also want to mention that one of the things that we're also doing is not everyone directly needs our beneficial services from the county in a way that talks about people that are in poverty. We also have small businesses, women-owned businesses, minority entrepreneurs, also veterans, people that may need assistance. So we're deciding to set aside our contracting opportunities in a way that will allow and entice these individuals to come in and to be able to have those contracts and not put those barriers up that may have been there before, and helping to set aside a percentage of those dollars. So we're talking potentially about $6 billion worth of business that the county does. If we were to inject that money by way of contracting with small businesses, that'll help have a triple-fold effect, because that money will go right back into the county, into those communities that are hard-pressed, into those communities that really need some uplifting and help to spur, I hope, small business. And that's one of the efforts that we're undertaking right now. In fact, we are even taking it a step further. So for those people that we're looking at getting jobs right now from our welfare to work programs, our GAIN programs, for example, we're saying we have a shortage of people that we need to fill positions in our secretarial pools, clerical pools, IT pools. So we're starting to get them trained and put into what we call a temp registry. And I hope that all our departments will soon take that as a charge and help us build out those individuals that currently receive assistance from us, transitioning off into their own stability and independence. So those are things that we're moving right now in those directions. And I'm very happy about that, because it's taken, I think, a long time that the county has been in a good position to make that happen. I also want to say that one of the things that I'm really proud about is this whole issue of helping our young people. Young people are in our care, whether they come from the Department of Children and Family Services through foster care or sometimes probation. And I will tell you that when I first started, I visited one of our probation camps. And to my surprise, I found a young man, 14 years of age, in his own cell. And I asked why was he there, and everyone else, all the other students were having a learning session. And they said, well, he's being punished. And I went in and was able to talk to the youngster. And youngster, after finding out a little bit more about him, wasn't a bad person. Maybe he got caught up in some circumstances. But the way that I found him was less than desirable. He did not have on appropriate garments and was really beaten down, you could see, emotionally, and maybe because of his life experiences that he had. But one thing that it taught me was that we need to treat our young people in a very different way. This wasn't a 25 or 45-year-old hardened criminal. This was a 14-year-old child. And as a result, I went back to the board and we worked with other board offices, and we got rid of what we called solitary confinement. So that doesn't exist now. And what we did was create a hope center. Instead of an area where people would be sent to because they were being punished, they would now be able to go to a lounge area that was protected, but was charming, was clean, was painted. Paintings were there. There were equipment. There were activities to do. There were other students. There were counselors there. There were, again, counseling and mentoring taking place. People were talking to the young people. It changes lives, believe me. And I've seen it happen there in those settings. We're now creating one school in our probation camps. We're actually closing a camp, Camp Gonzales, that will be for the first time dedicated to providing training opportunities across the board in high sector areas. So we're really looking at helping to give these young people, while they are in our care, a sense of being able to finish their high school or GED, but also getting certificates in different trades so that they come out with tools, not just in their mind, but also being able to get a job, or at least knowing that they can get a job. So those are things that we're actively involved in right now. I think those are some of the highlights of what we're doing, but I want to take it a little step further, because all of us in the county have our priorities. And one for me has always been the environment, as I said earlier, but giving young people opportunity, maybe their first job, maybe an at-risk student who's deemed at-risk by school or for whatever reasons, but giving them a chance to get exposed to something interesting, like the environment. And I told you earlier that in my district and parts of the county, we have very few parks. In fact, we have a lot of very hot, heated days where it gets really hot and you don't have adequate recreational space, or it's mostly all blacktop, even at our schools. So there isn't a lot of green space. There aren't a lot of soccer fields. There aren't a lot of football fields or baseball fields. There's not a lot of that recreational ability for people to get out. And sometimes it's not even safe to. So we're really moving in a different direction. And we have created an effort, expanded an effort that started even before I got there, known as Parks After Dark. And what that means is that it's summertime now. Sometimes parks close at 5 o'clock or during the weekday, and kids can't go anywhere. Parents can't go anywhere. You can't go walk your dog. You can't go with your grandparent. It's not safe. No one's there. Well, now we have gone from 3 parks where we have shown that this program can work and allowed 33 of all of our parks, and I'm talking big parks, that are going to be operational, and they're going to be available to provide health, fitness, education, yoga, dance, computer labs, all of that at our park space, and also provide meals for those that are eligible. That also happens. But it's creating a whole new environment for people to come around and gather. And the best part about the program that I like is that we're going to incentivize hiring up young people that were the at-risk kids, right? The 14 to 21-year-olds. You keep them off the street, but you give them a job, but you show them and you educate them as to what the potential are for learning how to work in an environment, a work setting. You show up, you dress appropriately, you have certain tasks you have to do, but at the end of the day, you're going to earn a paycheck. And it may be the only paycheck in that household for the time being because maybe mom isn't working or maybe mom is working, but there isn't enough to go around. And that paycheck becomes even more important. And it shows that young man or woman that there's responsibility that goes with that. So we're really happy about this Parks After Dark component. And I'm really excited because I went as far as to say it's important for our young people throughout the year to be able to take part in our communities and meet with people. Because oftentimes we're segregated. We're put in our silos. Kids don't always interact with seniors or in the neighborhood. You know, and it seems kind of natural, but on the other hand, it isn't natural if you're all from the same area and you don't even know each other. So one thing that we decided to do in our district was to spend about $1 million to, guess what, plant 1 million trees in poor neighborhoods, in front yards, in schoolyards. And you know why? Because trees are healthy. They provide canopy on these hot days. They provide shade. They provide safety. They also help to increase your property values because people like trees. So different things that can happen around a community just by getting our young people engaged and people that sometimes have been written off. And those are things that really excite me about what we're doing now. So the bottom line, I think, for me, is to say to you is that engagement, participation can happen at different levels. And it doesn't all have to happen just in one school setting or one club site. It can happen in many different venues. But the fact of the matter is we all have to come together because there shouldn't be a difference between the environmental group, the person that's planting a tree, or the senior citizen who maybe needs an outlet because they're by themselves in their home, but maybe can come out to the park and read to kids or have the children talking to that person, engaging, recreating, walking, helping to also understand that we're all one community. To me, those are exciting things that can happen around not just the County of Los Angeles as we have attempted to improve upon, but to make sure that these are lasting values and lasting things that won't go away long after I'm gone, that they'll continue and that people will be able to say, this is where we started. One last thing. We're using one last thing. One of my priorities is to repurpose property that right now may be of no value. We have a hospital. Have you ever seen I'm sure you have, they had a whole program around General Hospital for years. Okay, remember that big building? Well, that big building is in my district in LA, okay? And it sits there empty. We can't use it because it's not structurally capable of withstanding a big earthquake. So guess what? It's empty. We have another one we replaced it with. But what can I do with that building now? So I'm starting to think with folks at the county and stakeholders and people who are homeless advocates, how we can repurpose that whole campus. Guess what? We have a plan. And we're going to work on it. We can potentially build up to 700 units of housing for homeless people, for young people, for foster age transitioning out of the foster care program, and even help to deal with the people that live and work in the surrounding area, which by and large is very low income. So those are things that are exciting, and we're hoping that people will gravitate to those ideas. And if you have any questions or you're interested, come visit us. LA County is a big place. We have a lot to offer, and we certainly want to continue to support many of you. I know many of you here are competing for this very prestigious award, All-American Cities, and I think there are 2 from California. Good luck to all of you. And I would just want to say that it's been a privilege and an honor to be here to share just a small part of what we're doing, revolutionizing, I think, the county government in Los Angeles for the first time in our history. And it's really good to be back home after spending 12 years in Washington and to know that you can move mountains and really move hearts and minds and save people in a good way. I'm not saying that I'm doing it. We are all doing it. But we're all moving in the right direction. So thank you for your patience, for your time, and it's been an honor and a privilege to be here. So thank you for having me. Thank you.